RV Basics 101. And RV Basics 101 is going to cover today, how do you prepare your RV before you take a trip? So I'm going to display on what I do to prepare my RV before we take off. Just a disclaimer, there's a lot of other things you should be doing before you take off on your RV, but it's not something that you have to do every single time. There's things inside that need to be done too, as far as stowing away cabinets, make sure things are locked up so things don't fall out of the cabinets while you're driving, and making sure that the slides come in properly. There's this whole vast thing of things you start to do as you start to do it more and more. But make sure you check with your manufacturer, which is the most important thing, on what the procedure is. Things you want to do is you want to make sure that you dump. So I want to show you guys how to properly dump. In Arizona, I don't keep my dump hose directly connected to the dump portal that's here, because they have a rule that requires some sort of ramp, and I'm not going to spend the $50 for a ramp because I never use it. Okay, so over here is where we have our wet bay. Our wet bay is going to have this is our levels. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and connect up our hose. So once you have your hose, you go ahead and it should be in the closed position. You open it up, you go ahead and open it and put it there. Okay, now from there, I always keep some kind of glove ready, but in my case, I'm not going to use any gloves. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the sewage, then the wastewater, because I use the sewage first, because when you pull the sewage, it opens it up. Now the valves inside there are getting into the macerator, and I need the macerator to push it back out. And the reason why I start with the sewage first is because that's the yucky water, and I'll clean it out with the wastewater. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick on the macerator, and it starts filling up the hose. It starts pushing it out. As you can see, it's starting to run through the yuckiness. Oh, gracious. Okay. So you let it keep on pushing, or whether you have a macerator or turbo macerator or not, you're going to be sitting here waiting for it. In my case, Entegra just makes this thing completely simple. So once it's done pushing, go ahead and close that, and you can check the black tank. It's going to show 0. Yes, my gauges do work properly. I keep them clean. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to pull your wastewater holding, because now what it does is flushes through all the dirty, yucky water with all just water that you use to wash dishes with, or take a shower with, or just even wash clothes if you do have a washer and dryer. You let it push through, and you just check. And this is how long it really takes me to do it with no cuts. Go ahead and back to me. And I think we're almost done here. 25%. Now, not everybody has the gauges. You just have to go basically on listening to it, because you could hear it going through. And there you have it. That's it. So you close the wastewater tank, and then you turn off your macerator. Wait for a little bit to push out, and that's it. All right. Oh, always hit your head. Okay, so after you're doing that, you go ahead and you just lift up your hose. So I'm only located maybe like 4 feet. Well, this is really unlikely sometimes, just how I parked my RV closest as I can. I'm going to go ahead and close this up in closed position, and I'll go ahead and fit it back into the compartment. For those Entegra people, I did put an aftermarket hose into this that was a little bit bigger than the one that came with it. So in case you're seeing that, no, this one does not come with it.
I would like to add that when you replace original RV parts with aftermarket parts, try to find the like part to it, so that way it fits and conforms to the RV better.
But it fits in there perfect. So there you go. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the water. On my case, I have it on hookup city water fill. I've already filled up the tanks. That'll be another video too. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the water. Okay, once that water's off, I'm going to go ahead and release the pressure, turn my pump off, Okay, so it should be off. Now I'm going to disconnect the hose. Like I said, always get a glove. So there shouldn't be any water. Make sure that's nice and close. And then roll up your hose. In my case, I already have a hose reel for it. It's pretty fancy. I like to clean off the hose with the towel or with the glove as I'm pulling it in. Okay, now that is how you handle your wet bay. Next thing is you're going to want to disconnect your power. So doing the power requires two different things. Whether you want to keep your generator running, in my case, the first thing you do is when you get to it, anytime you're disconnecting or connecting the power, it's always good to go ahead and disconnect the breaker first. Go ahead and put it in the off position before you see it there. And as you can see here right now, this is what's going on with it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off, and it should turn off the breaker, the power to it. Then you pull your protection device or your connector out of it. Go ahead and remove that from there and store it. Anytime you're rolling up a hose, always make sure you're cleaning off the hose as you're pulling it back in. I use my glove to do that. You can use a towel. Sometimes I'm using a towel. Try to get it organized. You can see me rolling it up a little bit discombobulated, but that's fine. As long as it gets in there and somewhat organized, you're okay. And that's it. Now that's how you disconnect your power. Other than that, one of the things I normally do in order to get ready. Next thing you want to do is make sure that the awnings are all tucked in. All right, I got this nifty tool, and I'm going to go ahead and bring in the sunshades.
Did you unplug it?
Okay, that's one of them. You also want to make sure any awnings are in. You want to show the awnings, Cristiano? Make sure that the awnings are all in as well. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that in.
It's always good practice to go ahead and close your awnings or retract them before you ever leave the RV to either go eat dinner, lunch, or maybe take a hike.
Before you take off in your RV, you always want to make sure that you give it proper time to warm up and the engine to start, the generator to start too. And you want to make sure that the airbags are completely full before you lift your jacks up. Because what happens is if it lifts up and the whole frame is sitting back down on those airbags, there's nothing to protect it from hitting the body. So you want to make sure that you give it about an ample 15 minutes to actually start up. I went ahead and started it up, and I started up the generator to keep everything running inside the RV. And we're not going to be taking off for another hour. So I like to give it ample time to be started before I take off. Let's go ahead and bring in the rest of the awnings.
The most common problem when RVing is leaving your awnings out before you take off.
As you can see, next thing is we're going to go ahead and lift up our jacks, and then we're going to go ahead and pull jack plates that are underneath it that I use for protective from the asphalt after we do that. Now, you could go in, you could buy them for $50 a pop. I just use regular plywood. Plywood seems to work great, and when it goes bad, you just cut yourself a little bit more of it. You started your RV, and now it's time to go ahead and lift up the jacks. I haven't brought my slides in yet. Depending on the manufacturer, whether you're Newmar, Entegra, doesn't matter who it is, they all have their certain way of doing it. So check with your manufacturer before you just go based upon this video. But what I'm going to do now is just lift up my jacks. So what we're going to do, hit the power button and retract all. Now I also want to make sure that my gauges are good for my air before I actually hit that. Okay, so one thing you want to make sure you do before you start taking off, wait for the air pads to fill up with air before you take off, because it's basically, there's no space between the tire and the body itself. Now you just go ahead and have a little guy go ahead and grab the pads for you.
Another reason why I love using plywood for jack plates is because I always seem to leave them behind wherever I go. So this way it doesn't cost me so much if I do it. It never hurts getting the rest of the family involved in taking off in the RV. That way you can always assure that you have a backup eye when you take off.
One important thing you want to make sure you do before you hit the road is always check your tire pressure. Depending on the manufacturer, it always depends on where you're driving and what the amount of pressure requires on your tires. But being a Class A, you want to make sure that you have the ample amount of tire pressure so the thing doesn't explode on you. But other than that, these are going to be running at 120. They recommend them being at 130, which is a little high, but I keep them about 10 pounds under because as it's driving down the road, it heats up and then it just increases in pressure. But that's it. Other than that, that's my guide as far as what I do in order to get started every time I take off on my RV. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more content. Talk to you soon.